The desert stretched in every direction, endless ridges of scorched rock and sand that shimmered in the noon heat. The convoy crawled across the wasteland, armored transports growling in unison, each wheel sinking slightly into dust that rose in choking veils behind them. Captain Adrian Kane sat inside the lead vehicle, helmet visor lowered, scanning the horizon with eyes that had long ago learned to anticipate disaster. His voice carried steady over the comms, a calm anchor in the vibrating hum of engines and men shifting nervously with rifles across their chests. The mission was simple on paper: transport confiscated narcotics from a border raid back to the garrison. But Kane had been in this war long enough to know that simplicity never survived first contact with reality. The drugs weren't ordinary. Lab reports suggested chemical traces laced with foreign signatures, things no human cartel should have access to. That made them valuable, and value always drew blood. Sergeant Marcus Vey sat opposite Kane, helmet tucked against his thigh, restless as ever. His knuckles tapped on the armor plating, rhythm quickening with every mile. He was a brawler at heart, built like a man born to break walls, and patience never came easily to him. "They'll hit us," Vey muttered, eyes burning with certainty. "Out here, middle of nowhere, they'll be waiting with launchers. Then we'll be ready," Kane replied, voice clipped but firm. At the rear of the cabin, Corporal Elias Rain adjusted the display on his drone controller. Thin, pale, with a face sharpened by sleepless nights and the faint metallic hum of cybernetic implants beneath his skin, he was the mind that kept them alive when steel and fire weren't enough. His small reconnaissance drones circled high above the convoy, relaying distorted images of barren ridges. "Nothing on scopes," Rain said, though a crease marked his brow. "Doesn't mean they aren't there." Kane said nothing more. He preferred silence to words that wasted air. His men trusted him because he didn't need to fill every space with talk. When he spoke, it mattered. The first explosion came without warning, a sudden blossom of fire that tore apart the third transport in the line. The ground shuddered, and fragments of metal howled across the desert. Within seconds, smoke columns rose, screams filled the comms, and the convoy lurched into chaos. "Contact left ridge," Rain shouted, voice pitched higher than usual. His drones caught the flare of rocket trails streaking from a jagged ridge to the north. Another pair of projectiles hissed into the air, arching toward them. Kane slammed the comms. "All units, dismount. Return fire." The vehicle doors burst open, soldiers spilling into the open with rifles blazing. Vey was the first out, helmet locking in place as he sprinted toward the burning wreck. He moved like a man who feared nothing, rifle cracking sharp bursts that echoed across stone. The second rocket struck just behind him, detonating in a burst that flung sand into the sky and hammered the air with concussion. Vey staggered but didn't fall. He turned his fury on the ridge, unleashing a storm of bullets. Kane advanced methodically, crouched low, rifle braced against his shoulder. He didn't waste rounds. Each shot was measured, purposeful, finding shadows where enemy muzzles flared. He shouted orders, shifting squads into cover behind boulders and broken transports. His tone carried more weight than explosions, steady, immovable, a lifeline in the chaos. On the far side, Rain hunched over his wrist controller, eyes narrowed. "Drones compromised. I'm overriding their fire controls." His voice trembled with strain, his implants humming audibly as he forced signal against jamming interference. Sparks leapt from the device, but then two of the enemy's own quadcopters spun midair and turned on their handlers, spraying rounds into the ridge. The terrorists were no ordinary raiders. They wore patched armor, carried black market rifles fused with alien alloys, and their coordination suggested training beyond desperation. A heavy weapon emerged on the ridge, a mounted cannon, jury-rigged onto exoskeletal limbs of some kind. It pivoted toward the convoy like a predator sniffing prey. Vey roared over the comms. "That gun's mine." He broke from cover before Kane could countermand, charging through whistling gunfire. His exosuit servos whined as he slammed shoulder first into a smaller raider, crushing bone with the impact, and then tore the weapon free to turn it against another. Blood misted across the sand as he pressed on, unstoppable. "Vey, hold position," Kane barked, but it was too late. The sergeant thrived where death came closest, and Kane had long since learned to adapt his command around that truth. The ridge erupted in smoke as friendly fire intensified. Kane shifted his men like chess pieces, countering flanking attempts, ensuring that every yard gained was held with discipline. His own rifle dropped 2 insurgents who tried to flank through a gully, his aim unerring despite the chaos. Rain's voice strained through static. "I've got a signal breach, pushing counterhack." His body shook with effort as he forced alien code back against its makers. The hostile drones spasmed midair, some crashing, others turning on their operators in sudden betrayal. The cannon discharged, plasma slashing across the convoy. One transport melted in half, crew screaming as flames consumed it. Kane's jaw tightened, rage buried beneath control. He signaled a mortar strike from portable launchers, sending his men to flank the ridge. Explosions tore into enemy lines, scattering them like startled insects. They reached the cannon. With a guttural snarl, he ripped the gunner from its seat and drove a combat knife into his chest. He seized the cannon's controls, swung it toward a cluster of raiders, and unleashed a blast that incinerated half the ridge in one searing wave. The surviving terrorists broke, scrambling back over the rocks. Sporadic fire followed them, but the battle was decided. Silence settled, broken only by crackling flames and the groans of wounded men. Kane stood amid the wreckage, rifle low, visor reflecting burning transports. His men gathered slowly, battered but alive. He felt the ache of loss but did not show it. Leaders carried burdens alone. Rain staggered forward, clutching his controller. His voice was hoarse. "Captain. I pulled encrypted data from their drones before they crashed. This wasn't just a raid. They were protecting the shipment." Kane turned toward the smoldering crates torn open in the chaos. Inside lay sealed canisters filled with crystalline powder that pulsed faintly, unnatural in its glow. He recognized nothing of it, yet every instinct told him it wasn't made for human hands. They approached, armor scorched, blade dripping. He spat into the dust, glaring at the canisters. "That's no drug I've ever seen." Kane's gaze lingered, silent, the weight of realization heavy in his chest. The convoy hadn't been carrying narcotics. They had been transporting something far more dangerous, something that explained the ferocity of the attack. The desert wind shifted, carrying smoke across the horizon. Kane lifted his visor, eyes narrowing against the light. He knew the fight wasn't over. This was only the beginning. The night had fallen hard over the desert, a black canopy pierced by cold stars and the faint glow of distant fires still smoldering from the ambush. The surviving transports were circled around a half-collapsed fuel depot that served as their makeshift shelter. Soldiers moved in shadows, repairing weapons, tending wounds, and keeping watch on ridges where enemies might gather again. Inside the depot's cracked walls, Captain Adrian Kane crouched near a portable lamp, studying the crystalline canisters recovered from the ruined convoy. Each container pulsed faintly with a pale inner light, as if alive. His jaw tightened as he turned one over in his hand. It was heavier than it looked, and unnervingly warm. Corporal Elias Rain worked across from him, wires spread around like veins on the dusty floor. His pale face was lit by the flicker of screens as he traced corrupted code through the fragments he had pulled from enemy drones. His implants whined faintly, gears beneath flesh overclocking under pressure. Sweat gathered along his temple, but he pushed on, muttering to himself in clipped fragments only he understood. "Talk to me, Corporal," Kane said finally, voice steady but carrying a weight of command that cut through the static hum of machinery. Rain exhaled slowly, tapping the side of his head. "It isn't narcotics. Not even close. The crystalline structure isn't man-made. This stuff carries embedded nanits alien in origin, designed for integration with biology. The drone's data suggested the material rewrites cells, strengthening tissue while erasing, well, whatever made the host human." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Weaponization?" "More than that," Rain replied, his voice low. "They're trying to make hybrids. Soldiers that think like humans but endure like something else entirely. The raiders were just test subjects. Whoever's behind this wants scale." The words sank into the silence like lead. Kane's mind worked through the implications: terrorist groups emboldened by alien technology, narcotics replaced with weapons that could alter flesh itself, and humanity caught in the middle without knowing the full extent of the game. He had fought long enough to understand when the war was shifting toward something darker. The steel door banged open, and Sergeant Marcus Vey strode in, still armored, his movements restless as if combat had wound him tighter instead of wearing him down. He dropped a dented helmet onto the table, its visor split wide by a plasma graze. "You two look like undertakers at a funeral," Vey said, voice sharp with energy he couldn't shed. His eyes flicked to the glowing canisters and then back to Kane. "You figured out what they are?" Rain hesitated, glancing at his captain. Kane gave a slight nod, the kind of permission that meant truth, however heavy, was better spoken aloud. "They're not drugs," Rain explained. "They're alien biotech. Anyone who takes it won't stay human." Vey's face hardened. He picked up a canister and stared at it, as though daring it to challenge him. "So they're feeding this poison to the streets? Using our people as test rats?" "That's exactly what they're doing," Kane said, voice grim. "And we were moving their shipment without knowing it. Somebody high up knew more than they told us." Vey's jaw flexed as rage built in silence. He set the canister down carefully, then leaned against the wall with his arms folded. His posture was casual, but his eyes burned with the same heat he carried into battle. Kane studied him for a moment. Marcus Vey had always been fire to his ice, rage where he himself was restraint. In the field, that fury turned battles. Off the field, it threatened to consume him. Kane had to keep him pointed in the right direction or risk losing him to his own instincts. Rain returned to his console. "That's not the worst of it. The data stream I pulled showed external relays, alien coding signatures far outside anything human groups could improvise. This isn't just black market dealing. Terrorists have an alien supplier." The depot's silence grew heavy. Even Vey, for all his bravado, could not shrug off the weight of that statement. Kane stood, helmet under his arm. "We hold position until dawn. Then we move to the safe house near the border, get this intel transmitted to command. Whatever this is, it's bigger than our convoy." The words had barely settled when the night shattered again. A streak of fire cut through the black sky, slamming into the depot wall with a thunderous crack that shook dust from the rafters. The structure groaned, half of it collapsing in a spray of rubble. Soldiers outside screamed as gunfire erupted from the dunes. "They found us," Vey snarled, grabbing his rifle with a grin that looked more like the baring of fangs. "Defensive positions," Kane roared, already moving through smoke. His voice cut through confusion, guiding men to cover, turning fear into function. Rain dragged his console close, fingers racing over controls as small defense drones activated, rising like metal hornets to circle the depot. Streams of data flickered across his visor as he hacked at the incoming assault patterns. Shapes emerged from the darkness, enemies far bolder than the ambushes earlier. These raiders moved with precision, covered by weapons glowing with alien circuitry. Their fire tore holes through walls like paper, forcing soldiers back under the rain of plasma bolts. Vey vaulted the collapsed barrier, charging headlong into the storm. Kane barked his name but knew it was futile. The sergeant thrived in the teeth of the fight. His rifle thundered, cutting down the first two raiders, then he slammed into a third with enough force to send armor cracking. He gutted the man with a knife, ripping the weapon free and firing into another squad before they could bring him down. Kane held the line, every shot from his rifle deliberate, every command turning retreat into structured defense. His calm was unshakable, even as debris fell around him, even as casualties mounted. From the rear, Rain's voice strained through static. "Captain, their weapons are running on the same biotech frequency as the canisters. If I can sync interference, I can neutralize half their gear." "Do it," Kane ordered without hesitation. Rain's implants burned as he overrode alien coding, blood trickling from his nose, but then enemy rifles sparked and died in their owners' hands. Confusion rippled through the raiders as half their firepower went dark. Vey seized the moment, charging straight into their ranks like a force of nature, roaring as he tore through them with reckless brutality. He was blooded but unstoppable, human fury against alien corruption. Kane surged forward with his squad, pressing the advantage, cutting down the remaining raiders as they faltered. Within minutes the depot was secured again, bodies scattered across the sand, alien-warped weapons cooling beside them. Breathless silence followed, broken only by the crackle of flames. Vey staggered back inside, face streaked with soot, eyes still blazing. "That all you got?" he muttered to the corpses. Rain collapsed to one knee, drained, clutching his controller. "That wasn't a random hit. They knew exactly where we were." "Which means," his voice trailed, but Kane understood. "It meant someone had betrayed their position." Kane looked at the canisters still glowing faintly on the table, then at his men. The enemy was not only stronger than expected, they were organized, resourced, and intent on turning humanity into something unrecognizable. Dawn broke pale over the desert, a thin veil of light spreading across fractured ground and the wreckage left by the night assault. The depot stood in ruins, walls cracked and blackened, the smell of scorched metal mingling with blood that had already dried into the sand. Captain Adrian Kane stood among the debris, helmet under his arm, face hardened into stone as his men gathered around him. Their silence spoke louder than any words. They were alive, but they knew the war was changing beneath their feet. Corporal Elias Rain adjusted the patch on his arm where medics had treated a deep graze. His eyes were ringed with exhaustion, the faint glow of his implants flickering irregularly, but his voice remained sharp. "The data from their equipment confirms it. The raiders weren't acting alone. They're a node in a larger network, all of it fed by alien technology. Whoever is supplying them isn't just selling weapons. They're seeding the planet with hybrid soldiers." Sergeant Marcus Vey spat into the dust, the sound sharp against the silence. He had cleaned his rifle but not himself, blood still stained his armor, his jaw shadowed by grime. "So what? We track them down, we tear their nest apart, and we burn it clean. You don't let rats infest your house, you drown them." Kane's eyes flicked to Vey, then back to the others. He valued fire, but fire needed control. "Command isn't here. We can't wait for orders. If we sit still, we'll be hit again. We take the fight to them before they bring more reinforcements." The plan was forged quickly, stripped of flourish. Their recon drones, what few remained intact, traced signal echoes toward an industrial zone abandoned after the first years of the war. There, hidden beneath skeletal factories, intelligence suggested the raiders had established a stronghold. If the crystalline canisters were being distributed across the border, that site was likely the artery pumping it into circulation. They traveled light. Damaged transports were left behind, wounded escorted to safer ground. Kane led only his core squad and the few soldiers still combat-ready. Each man understood the stakes. If the drugs spread, entire colonies would collapse from within, human cities turned into laboratories for alien corruption. The approach through the industrial graveyard was silent but tense. Metal towers leaned like broken bones, their shadows cutting across cracked asphalt. Every sound carried too far in the stillness, the crunch of boots, the hum of Rain's drones, the faint grind of Vey's exosuit servos. Kane raised a hand, bringing them to a halt near the shattered hull of a refinery. Through the haze, faint lights pulsed beneath a collapsed overpass. Enemy patrols shifted in and out of view, their armor glinting faintly with alien circuitry. The stronghold lay ahead. "Options?" Kane asked quietly. Rain adjusted his visor, data streams reflecting against his pale skin. "Their defenses are wired into hybrid systems. I can short them, but only briefly. Once I do, they'll know we're here." Vey smirked, teeth flashing. "Then we hit hard and fast. No hesitation. No retreat." Kane gave a single nod. "We infiltrate the outer perimeter. Once the defenses are down, we strike. Keep it tight." They moved as shadows, slipping through ruined alleys, scaling collapsed beams. Kane advanced with deliberate precision, each step calculated. Vey followed close behind, restless energy simmering beneath restraint, his eyes already searching for the thick of the fight. Rain brought up the rear, fingers dancing across his console, murmuring code like a mantra. Near the perimeter wall, alien turrets swept arcs of red light across the wasteland. Rain dropped to one knee, controller flashing as he forced interference. Circuits sparked, and the turrets jerked erratically, their barrels swiveling toward their own patrols. Alarmed shouts rang out as the raiders scrambled, caught off guard by their own defenses turning traitor. Now, Kane ordered. Gunfire split the stillness. Vey surged ahead like a battering ram, rifle blazing as he cut down the first squad before they could recover. Kane's own fire was cold and exact, each round carving space for his men. Rain unleashed hacked turrets in their favor until the circuits fried under strain, then released microdrones that exploded among enemy ranks with precise bursts. The battle flooded across the perimeter. The raiders fought with alien-forged rifles, their armor glowing with pulsing veins of unnatural energy. Yet even with superior firepower, they faltered beneath the ferocity of the attack. Humanity's edge was not in weapons but in will, the capacity to adapt, improvise, and fight past fear. Vey embodied that truth. He crashed into a squad wielding an alien warbeast, a creature fused with metal spines and bone-plated skin. It charged, more wide, but Vey roared louder, meeting it head-on. His exosuit groaned as he locked its jaws apart with sheer strength, driving his combat blade into its throat. The beast shrieked, collapsed, and he stood over it, chest heaving, eyes wild with savage triumph. Kane pressed deeper into the complex, signaling his men to form around him. Every corridor of twisted steel became a battlefield, every rusted pipe cover a shield. His calm voice never wavered, anchoring the squad even as casualties mounted. He fired with precision, struck with certainty, and kept moving forward, because hesitation would mean death. Rain nearly collapsed from the strain of his implants. He jacked directly into an alien relay, neural pathways burning with borrowed electricity. His body shook violently, but the payoff came in a cascade of chaos. Enemy comms went dark, automated gates opened at his command, and internal defenses shredded their own operators. His skin blistered where metal met flesh, but he refused to stop. They reached the stronghold's heart, a cavernous hangar lined with crates of crystalline canisters. The glow was blinding, rows upon rows of alien biotech stacked like fuel waiting to ignite. Kane felt a cold weight in his chest at the sight. If even a fraction of it reached human populations, the war would be over before it began. A voice rang out across the chamber, guttural yet fluent, and from the shadows stepped not a raider but a collaborator. His armor was human but marked with alien sigils, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. He held his rifle with trained precision and smiled with a fanatic's certainty. "You are too late," he said. "The future is no longer yours. Humanity is weak. With their gift, we become more." Kane raised his rifle. "You gave up being human the moment you sold your kind to them." The traitor fired first. Bullets ripped across the hangar, sparking against steel. The battle erupted, Kane's squad scattering for cover, returning fire with unyielding ferocity. Vey bellowed as he charged the collaborator, their clash brutal and primal, steel against flesh. Rain forced himself back into the relay, unlocking storage clamps that sent crates crashing down onto enemy fighters. The fight raged until the collaborator fell, Vey's blade buried deep in his chest, his smile finally broken into silence. The hangar quieted, bodies strewn across glowing crates, the squad panting in the aftermath. Kane advanced to the dying man, looking into eyes that flickered with fading alien fire. "Who's supplying you?" he demanded. The man coughed blood, voice rasping. "This is only one arm. Others will rise. You cannot kill what is already within you." His head slumped, lifeless. The fire at the stronghold still burned behind them, a pillar of smoke stretching into the morning sky, marking destruction and defiance in equal measure. Kane led his men through the broken industrial ruins, their boots crunching over glass and steel, the acrid taste of ash lingering in the air. Every face bore exhaustion, but no one spoke of retreat. They knew the war had already shifted into something far greater than they had imagined. Corporal Elias Rain walked with one hand pressed to his temple, implants still flickering from the overload of the last fight. His skin was pale, lips dry, but his mind never slowed. He kept scanning, watching data streams across his visor, searching for any signs of pursuit. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "The relays I cracked fed into a larger hub. They'll know we hit this place. Reinforcements are already inbound." Kane glanced at him, the weight of command steady in his gaze. "How soon?" "Minutes," Rain answered. "Not hours." Sergeant Marcus Vey spat dust from his mouth and tightened the strap on his armor. Good. Saves us the trouble of hunting them down. His grin was savage, but his eyes told another story. He was running on fumes, running on rage, and Kane knew that fire, if left unchecked, would burn him hollow. They emerged into the open desert where jagged cliffs rose to the east, and that was when the low hum began to tremble through the air. Kane stopped in his tracks, looking skyward. Shadows spread across the sand as a massive dropship descended from the clouds, its hull marked with alien sigils that glowed faintly like veins of fire. The ship was no smuggler's vessel. It was warforged, a transport capable of unleashing an army in minutes. Positions, Kane ordered, his voice calm but edged with iron. The squad scrambled into cover, rifles ready, as the dropship opened its bay doors. A flood of enemy soldiers poured forth, armored with hybrid plating that pulsed with alien light. Their movements were precise, disciplined, nothing like the raiders they had faced before. Behind them, towering constructs stepped onto the sand, half machine, half beast, their claws gleaming like blades. Kane steadied his rifle. His men looked to him, and he gave them what they needed most, conviction. We hold here. If they land and spread, the colony is finished. We end it now. The battle erupted in a thunder of fire. Plasma bolts seared across the sand, tearing craters where Kane's men had stood seconds before. He returned fire with calculated precision, every shot finding a target, his voice barking orders that cut through chaos like a blade. His calm was unshakable, and that calm steadied the hands of those around him. Vey charged into the thick of it, roaring defiance, exosuit servos screaming as he ripped through enemy lines. He fired until his rifle overheated, then threw it aside and seized a raider by the throat, snapping it with one brutal twist before seizing the fallen's weapon to continue the slaughter. He fought like a man possessed, as though sheer will could defy death itself. Rain sat behind a broken wall, hands trembling as he connected directly to the alien ship's signal. His implants sparked, his body convulsing as he forced his consciousness into hostile systems. His breath came ragged, every second burning his nerves raw, but he pressed deeper, overriding failsafes, seeking the heart of the ship's controls. Captain, he gasped, blood running from his nose, I can shut it down, but it'll kill me. Kane's jaw tightened, eyes fixed on the battlefield. You hold that line until I tell you otherwise. Not before. The constructs advanced, massive limbs tearing through cover, scattering men like broken dolls. Kane moved with icy precision, planting charges as he retreated, detonating them at the perfect moment to cripple one beast mid-stride. The explosion lit the sky, but another followed close behind, its claws slashing through debris. Kane didn't flinch. He fired point-blank into its face, emptying his rifle until the creature collapsed in fire and ash. Vey leapt onto the back of a third, driving his blade between armored plates, hanging on as the machine thrashed wildly. His screams were primal, each strike a declaration of humanity's refusal to be broken. When the beast finally fell, Vey rolled free, battered, bleeding, but alive. Rain screamed as he forced his implants further, his body arching as though struck by lightning. The alien ship groaned overhead, its engines faltering. Alarms echoed across the battlefield as its systems spasmed under his assault. Almost, there, he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of pain. Kane fought his way to him, crouching beside his corporal as enemy fire slammed into the wall above. Rain, look at me. You're not done until I say. You understand? Rain's eyes flickered with static light, but he nodded weakly, forcing himself to keep fighting inside the machine. The dropship lurched suddenly, its descent unstable. Enemy troops faltered, glancing skyward as their lifeline groaned and shifted. Kane seized the moment. Push forward. Break them. His men rallied, emboldened by his command. Vey surged back into the fray, leading a brutal counterattack that cut through enemy lines with unstoppable momentum. Kane advanced beside him, rifle steady, cutting down anything that stood in their path. The dropship's engines screamed as flames erupted from within. Rain's body convulsed, smoke rising from the ports in his neck, but his voice came through, ragged but triumphant. I've got it. I'm bringing it down. The massive vessel shuddered, spiraling out of control as systems failed one after another. It tilted, engines bursting into fireballs, and then crashed into the desert with a cataclysmic roar. The explosion split the sky, heat washing over the battlefield as shockwaves tore through enemy ranks. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fire and the distant groans of the dying. The ground was littered with bodies, alien, hybrid, and human alike. Kane lowered his rifle slowly, breathing steady despite the carnage around him. He turned to Rain, who lay slumped against the wall, his body trembling, blood streaking his face. Kane crouched beside him, hand firm on his shoulder. "You did it. You held the line." Rain's faint smile flickered beneath exhaustion. "They underestimated us." Kane nodded once, the words echoing his own thoughts. The enemy had believed humanity weak, fractured, vulnerable to corruption. What they had found instead was resilience, fire, and a will to survive that no alien science could replicate. Vey stumbled back, armor scorched, blade dripping with black ichor. He spat, wiped his mouth, and laughed bitterly. "They thought they could turn us into cattle. They forgot we bite." The squad stood among the wreckage, fewer than before but unbroken. Kane looked at the horizon, smoke rising into the endless sky. He knew this was not victory, not truly. It was survival. The war was only beginning, and what they had faced here was only a fragment of the storm to come. But he also knew something else, that as long as humanity stood together, as long as men like these fought at his side, no alien force would ever claim their future. He raised his rifle, the gesture simple but absolute. "This isn't the end. It's the opening shot. And we'll be the ones to finish it." The desert wind carried his words into the silence, and for the first time since the ambush, his men smiled not because the war was over, but because they still had the strength to fight.